So What Remains started with a question, and it was really a question about legacy and the traces we leave behind. And that got me thinking about memory and perception, and how in fact everything that we communicate about ourselves, everything that we project about our identities is a narrative. Our beliefs, our attitudes, the things that we inherit, and the things that we pass on to our children too. So I was interested, in light of various different changes that go through people's lives, whether it's trauma or transformation in some form. And I was interested to identify, is there a way in which my artwork can get a viewer to reconsider how they perceive, not just art, but how they think about looking, how they think about engaging with art. So I started going back through 20 plus years of archival photography that I had taken across the world. I had the privilege of traveling a lot with my previous work in research. And so I was identifying images that could work to this overarching theme. And I realized that actually certain images could work grouped together. So for example, on the subject of love and growth, there were some really clearly key images that could work really well. So it started with the photography. Now, I've always been a poet since the day I could start writing. And so I'd always been writing poetry. But usually in my poetry, in my practice, it comes from my own experiences or what I've observed of something else, or things that I've seen in the world. And this was the first time I was using archival photography, my own archival photography, as the stimulus to write poetry, which in itself was a really interesting transformation. It was revealing to me my own phenomenological response to, for example, looking at a photograph I took of, say, a solitary child alone in Fukuyama in Japan. At the time, in my 20s, I took that photograph and thinking, gosh, this is the very image of isolation, of desolation, of sadness. And I was immediately emotionally concerned, where is this child's parents? But in fact, 20 years later, I looked back in that photograph and I wrote a poem that had very different values. It had a much more mature Stoic philosophy. And I realized this particular image is the image of solitude. It's something that we, as adults typically, tend to embrace in a very comforting way, in a self-soothing way. So there I was, going through this archival imagery and trying to work out, how did I feel? What was my perception now about these images? So the body of work here, What Remains, is fundamentally and dominantly black and white photography taken from all over the world. And the poetry that I integrate into it builds on my Stoic philosophy, something that is influenced by Epictetus, you might know Marcus Aurelius. But also, in terms of phenomenology, I'm a sculptor. So the other discipline within my practice is stoneware, it's clay sculpture. So throughout the body of this show, you'll see there are specific sculptures that, again, sometimes they're quite figurative, sometimes they're less representational, and they're intentionally a little bit more oblique or abstract. And they're very influenced by artists like Gordon Matta Clark, or Shirin Neshat, or Kara Walker, in the way that they are trying to get the viewer to reflect on what they see. What are their memories? What are you bringing to the table when you look at this piece of work? And therefore, how does that make you feel, not just about other people, but about yourself too? So my artwork is intentionally quite agitating. It's quite a provocation, if you like. I see my artwork and my art practice as having agency, and it's about activism, even though it creates space and quiet reflection. So What Remains is about memory, it's about perception, it's about identity, but specifically, it's about thinking and feeling and questioning how we see.